Well, hello all and welcome back to another video teaching going along with our Fear-Free Year Bible Study. This is a Bible study in which we're taking a look at all the different verses in the Bible which are instructive to us on how to live without fear and worry and anxiety in our present day and age. And speaking of our present day and age, just recently I was able to go and see a movie that came out, a Christian movie, and it is called His Only Son. And it was a very good movie. I don't know if it's still out now or certainly by the time you might be watching this in the future, whether it's out or available, but it was a great movie, and it was based on Abraham, and not really Abraham's whole life, but really centered around the one act of Abraham where Abraham was called to give his only son Isaac up as a sacrifice on an altar to God. And yes, it went into background in Abraham's life, as foreshadow to this event. So it was really an amazing thing because it really focused in on a pivotal moment in the history of Abraham's life. Would he be willing to sacrifice his only son, Isaac? And it made me start to think about Isaac and how that event impacted him, because Isaac was the sacrifice that Abraham was to give, and he was a teenager or older at the time that Abraham was doing this, and Isaac willingly laid his life on an altar, bound probably, and on a pile of wood, and he watched as his father's arm came up with a knife ready to kill him, and then he was going to be burned up. And that has got to have an impact on somebody. And so anyway, it made me start to think about Isaac and how he was impacted by this enormous event in the life of Abraham. And so I went into our Fear-Free study to see if there were verses or a verse that I could find that was spoken to Isaac as far as him living fear-free. And I found one. And so I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it because I'm very intrigued by Isaac and our Bible. So let's just go into Genesis chapter 26, and it's going to be verse 23 that I'm going to read, and I'll go to 25, and then we'll talk a little bit about it, and you'll see the fear-free verse in here. From there, this is Isaac, went up to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him that same night and said, I am the God of Abraham, your father. Fear not, for I am with you, and I will bless you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake. So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants dug a well. So here we have a fear-free verse where you see it's verse 24, and the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you, and I will bless you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake. Now, so God is telling Isaac to not have any fear, and you can see the reason why. The reason why Isaac should not have any fear is because of the promise that God made to Abraham, and the fact that God was going to fulfill that promise to Abraham. It wasn't for Isaac's sake, it was for the promise that God made to Abraham's sake. And this is what I see in Isaac's life, him basing his whole life on the fact that God came through for his father Abraham. And so why wouldn't he continue to follow God the way that his father did? Because he obviously witnessed God coming through on his promises, and even through horrific circumstances, making things come to pass so that Abraham's line would continue on. So it must have felt great to Isaac, kind of having that idea in his mind, living his life knowing I am supernaturally, God protected to continue on because of Abraham, because of the promise that God made to my father. It must have just felt great to know that there's really nothing that can happen to me. I have to be able to have at least one son and that be a prosperous line because God promised it to my father. Now, I'm only saying this and making a big deal of this because really everything as Christians that we hang our hats on, hang on the same promise made to Abraham. And that promise is called the Abrahamic covenant. And you can find that in Genesis 12 and other places. But Abraham and God had a very special relationship. God had chosen Abraham, and Abraham was a pagan. He wasn't Jewish. He chose him out of a pagan country and decided to bless him by giving him a promise, a set of promises. And those promises went that he was going to have land given to him. The land of Canaan was going to become his, a giant swath of land, much bigger than Israel is now. So that was one of the promises. He was also promised that there was going to be a great nation that was going to come out of his line, more people than the stars of the sky and the grains of sand on the ground. That was another promise. And he was also promised that the whole world was going to be blessed through his lineage. And that is the promise of Jesus, that there was going to be somebody that came out of the line of Abraham that was going to bless the entire world. And so this is where I can tell you that our promises as Christians coming from God hinge on the fact that God has kept, will keep his promises to Abraham. Obviously, Jesus coming out of Abraham's line was a blessing to the whole world, a blessing to us, but there's also future promises of this giant landmass given to the people of Israel, the people of Abraham. And that is a future promise because it hasn't happened yet, but it will happen when Jesus returns and comes to reign on earth in the millennial reign. You're going to see the area of Israel opened up to the degree that God had specified to Abraham. And we're going to see that happen. And we're going to see many, many people of the Jewish line come to know Jesus as their Lord and Savior. So we're going to see just blessing upon blessing because of the promise that God gave to Abraham. So we're hanging on to the same promise. We obviously are hanging on for dear life for the promises of that Jesus has given us of eternal life in heaven. But without Abraham, there would be no promises to the Christian. So we're the same as Isaac in this way. We're hanging on to what we know God promised to Abraham for our future too. And I just found that really interesting, and that we have that similarity with Isaac. Now, Isaac, in case maybe you don't even know about him, because there's not a whole lot in your Bible regarding Isaac. But what we do see about Isaac is his obedience to God and hanging on to these promises throughout his life. He has some similarities to Abraham, but it's almost like he as a son does a little bit better than Abraham because he's had this upfront, one-on-one personal witness of God's faithfulness to his father. And so if you look into Isaac's story, which is all surrounding here, this chapter 26, you'll see that at a certain point in Isaac's life, he's getting ready to leave and leave the area that he's in. And God says to him, don't go down to Egypt. Don't go down there. I'm going to tell you where to go. And Isaac does that. Now, Abraham, Isaac's father, went down to Egypt. And if you recall from Abraham's story, which is in that movie, Abraham goes down to Egypt, and it's against God's will. He leaves the place that God had called him to, which was the area of Canaan, and he goes down to Egypt. And there in Egypt is where things go bad for Abraham in certain ways. First of all, he lies to the king down there in Egypt and says that his wife Sarah is his sister, and that is not good. And because of that, you have a little blemish there on Abraham's record. What's interesting about Isaac is that he also is in a situation where he has to leave where he is, and God says to Isaac, don't go down to Egypt. I'm going to tell you where to go. And Isaac does listen, but he does the same thing that his father Abraham does. He's faced with a leader. His name is Abimelech, and he lies and says that his wife Rebecca is his sister. Same thing that his father did. But he's not gone down to Egypt, and he's not brought along with him a bunch of Egyptian slaves, which is where everything goes wrong with Abraham. Abraham goes down to Egypt, he lies, but he winds up gathering a bunch of servants down there in Egypt, and one of those servants is named Hagar. And he brings Hagar back up with him, and this is where Abraham's story goes very bad, because instead of Abraham waiting on the promise of God that there was going to be somebody that comes out of his and his wife Sarah's loins to propagate the line that God had ordained, Abraham has sex with one of these servant girls, Hagar, and he has another son, and that son's name is Ishmael. Now, interestingly, the name of the movie that I saw was His Only Son, and we know that Abraham did not just have one son. He had a son before he had Isaac. He had a son named Ishmael with this servant girl that he brought up from Egypt, and that was never supposed to happen. So there is another son, but interestingly, God does not consider Ishmael Abraham's true son, the son of the promise. He considers Isaac the son of the promise. And so his only son, it is in the Bible too, to offer your only son. In God's eyes, Isaac is Abraham's only son. Ishmael is Abraham's son, but it's not the son of the promise. And because of that, we see real division between Ishmael and Isaac throughout their history together. And we also see this going on into the line of Isaac. So meanwhile, I just want to make the point that there are some similarities between Isaac and Abraham's life, given that Isaac does lie too, just like Abraham lied, but Isaac does it a little better. He at least listened to God and didn't go down to Egypt. He just goes a little way away and goes where God tells him, and he does lie, but it doesn't turn into such a big ordeal. Isaac does wind up gaining a lot of wealth through in the same way that Abraham did when he had to leave where he was supposed to be, and it does set Isaac up for success in the future and blessing, because he didn't go against God and go down to Egypt. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about Isaac's life, just because there is not much, but there are some things that he did better than Abraham. Abraham took, obviously, Hagar, as I just discussed, along with Sarah. It seems, from what I can see, that Isaac only had one wife. Her name was Rebecca, and stayed with that one wife his whole life. So that was a better an improvement, more in line with God, obviously. And interestingly, Isaac did not choose Rebecca. It was a servant of Abraham's that went and chose Rebecca for Isaac. So Isaac did not have to do his own choosing, except at the very end. But yet, Isaac wound up with somebody from the line that God had chosen as his wife, this same lineage of Abraham, where Ishmael went off and he married into the Canaanite line, and that was again a division in God's order. Now, many of you know that the Arab nations, they would pin their lineage on the lineage of Ishmael, where the Jewish people pin their lineage on the lineage of Isaac, as we do as Christians. And so the division that happened because of Abraham going down to Egypt is still affecting the world today. And we do have another division that is caused because of Isaac, which is continuing to affect the world today. And that's the one kind of thing we know about Isaac from our Bibles, is the time where he kind of made an oopsie, and it really wasn't his fault. He was an old man, he couldn't see, and Jacob had tricked him. The story of Jacob and Esau, these were the twins that Rebekah bore, and Jacob tricks Esau into getting his birthright from Isaac, because Isaac is old, and like I said, he can't see. And so we do see this in Isaac, but this was not really Isaac's fault. We can't blame him for being tricked, being old. But there's some amazing things that we see because of what Isaac did unfortunately. He switched the birthright. Esau was the firstborn twin, Jacob was the secondborn twin, and Esau was supposed to get all the blessings of the birthright because he came first, but the switching of that puts Jacob in a position to be a blessing to the rest of the nations, and that was in God's plan. So again, can't blame Isaac for his little oopsie, and that's really the only oopsie in his life. The rest of his life it looks stellar to me. But I want to read to you what happened because of Isaac's oopsie, all right, and what God had ordained because of that mistake that was not a mistake. So I'm going to read to you the blessings that Isaac gave to Jacob and gave to Esau because of the mistake switch that happened when Isaac was called to bless them. And you're going to see how this affects us today in the same way that Ishmael and Isaac, that problem affects us today. So again, a similarity between Isaac and Abraham's life. So here's the blessing that Isaac gave to Jacob, all right, when he was pretending to be Esau. Here we go. And this is Genesis, and it's 27, and it's verse 27. So he, this is Jacob, came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and the plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." So this is the blessing of Isaac to Jacob when Isaac thought that Jacob was Esau. Isaac favored Esau. Esau was a man of the field, and Jacob had come wearing clothes that smelled a certain way and feeling a certain way, and Isaac blesses Jacob with Esau's blessing. But in the blessing, you've got to see some very important things, because this is the blessing on Jacob, who becomes the father of the nations of Israel. All of the different tribes of Israel come out of Jacob's line. And so here it is. May God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and the plenty of grain and wine. That has happened. Israel, if you've ever looked at it from a satellite image, it looks green and lush from above, and everything around it looks like a dry and desolate desert. So God has blessed Israel. Jacob's name gets changed to Israel. So God has blessed Jacob, and he's given him the fatness of the earth, the plenty of grain and wine. That is happening in Israel right now. Let nations serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. This is in the future. We are going to see all of the nations bow down to Israel, to the people of Abraham's line. Jesus is coming back, and all of the blessings that he promised Abraham and Isaac are going to come to fruition. And this blessing that he gave to Jacob, Israel, is also going to come to fruition. People are going to come to Israel and bow down and serve Jesus. And the people gathered there who believe in Jesus are people who have been grafted into the line of Israel and Abraham. And so this comes to fruition in the future. Right now, nobody's bowing down to Israel. Everybody's attacking Israel. And you need to know that that is not the future of Israel. That is not the future that was promised to Jacob. And God, Jesus, will make this promise, this blessing to Jacob come to fruition. And I want to finish, this is verse 29, by reading the rest of the blessing, which says, "Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." And this is a call out to you, if you are a Christian, that you need to be blessing the name of Israel, the name of Jacob, the nation of Israel. You might not agree with their politics or whatever, or who knows what you believe, but according to the Lord, all those who bless the name of Israel, who bless Israel, who stand with Israel, will be blessed. And if you curse Israel, you will be cursed. Hopefully, the nation of the United States will continue to stand on the side of Israel. I believe that God has stayed his hand from bringing terrible judgment to the nation of the United States because they stood consistently on the side of Israel. We know that eventually in the end times that is not going to be the case, because our Bibles tell us that Israel stands alone. But for now, the hope is that the United States will continue to stand with Israel. Israel right now is at war. There's war going on all around her, and officially they are at war. And so the hope is that the United States will remain Israel's greatest ally and continue to bless Israel, because if not, according to our Bible, our God, we will be cursed if we turn our back on Israel. Very important. Now, I want to read the blessing that is given to Esau from Isaac. And through this, you're going to see some more that has to do with our times and end times. This is verse 39 of Genesis chapter 27. Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. And again, that has happened, right? The Arab nations claim to be from the line of Esau, just like they claim to be from the line of Ishmael. That is the lineage that they follow out of Abraham. So the desert around Israel, there it is. Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, away from the dew of heaven on high. That the Arab nations they're desert. And so this has come to pass. And verse 40 says, by your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. And when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. And obviously, the Arab nations are they're known for their Muslim faith, and there is an aspect of that is very much about the sword. And you can read about that. Feel free to read the Quran and just know that there is an aspect of that is very much against Israel and the people of the book. And it calls in the Quran for the decapitation, and all that is in there. And so this is very much part of the Muslim faith. And as you see at the end there, it says, by the sword you shall live by your brother, and you shall serve your brother. That will come in the future. But it says, when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. And we know in the end days, there is all-out war of the surrounding nations around Israel against Israel. They will try to break the yoke of Israel from their neck and gather, get everything that they need from Israel, including all the provision, all the oil that's under the land of Israel. That is something that's going to happen. And you can read about the wars that are yet to come in Ezekiel 38, yes, or 83. Anyway, it's in my mind, 38. Read about the nations that are going to surround Israel and attack. And of course, in Revelation, we see that the people of Israel are certainly brutalized and attacked. So anyway, I just wanted to show you these things in Isaac's life that he predicted. It was a prophet of sorts with his blessing, not of sorts, he certainly was. He predicted what would happen between Esau and Jacob, Israel and the line of Esau, in the far future. He was the one that gave the blessings, and that certainly has come to pass and will come to pass. So it's very interesting to know that, Isaac had a prophetic gift, and in his blessings, all that came to pass. And really, there's not a whole lot else about Isaac other that he dies and he goes to the place of his fathers. But I do believe that Isaac, because of what he went through, he remained faithful, obedient to God. If God said to do something, he would do it. And with that, he didn't mess up as much as Abraham. He was able to gain a lot of blessings himself, a lot of provision himself, and he was able to propagate his line through giving these blessings to Jacob and steering Jacob in the right direction to not marry somebody out of the line of Abraham, which Jacob does as well. So there's a lot of kind of father to son good advice going on there, and it all started with the advice that God gave to Abraham, the covenant that God gave to Abraham, and all these subsequent sons after Abraham held on to the promise, as we should as Christians hold on to the promise, the covenanted promise given to Abraham, the Abrahamic covenant, that we will receive blessing upon blessing because of the one who's blessing the world. And his name is Jesus, and he is alive, and he will be coming back to continue on with doing what he said he was going to do, and make the nation of Israel great, and make the nations which are against Israel be cursed. So that will happen. Okay, so please, 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 if you are not somebody who supports Israel, get on the side of Israel. And certainly, if you are not somebody who knows Jesus Christ, today is your day. Turn your life over to Jesus. You want to be on his side, the side of the God of Israel. That's our King, King Jesus, all right? And he will be taking his throne from Israel when he returns in a millennial reign, and you want to be in his nation. You want to be part of his country, part of his family. So please turn your life over to Jesus today. And if you have any question about how to do that, you can always write me at info@injesusname.net. I'm happy to answer any questions. All right. It's in Jesus' name I'm doing this all. Bye now.